bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with the HockeyWriters.com. I'm here with Colton Pankew. Colton, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, Jim. Good. We got the series that I think everybody was wanting, so pretty excited for game one to start.
It's either going to be the highest of highs or like the lowest of lows if you're an Oilers fan, right? Like it's either going to go really, really well and be super entertaining and everybody's going to make it through it alive. And we'll see what happens with the results. Calgary, Edmonton, probably fairly evenly matched. Or this could be a blow. To me, anyway, this could be a blow by one team. Like I have no idea what to expect here. What are you thinking? Like just first quick reaction. Blowout, competitive series, really close. One team just creams the other. What are you expecting here?
I think it'll be a close series. I've said for a while I thought if these two met up, for some reason I have this hunch, Flames in 6. I know a lot of listeners to the show aren't going to like to hear that, but I think it will be a tight series. I don't expect – I mean, I know we've seen that one pretty lopsided game between these two, I think the last time they met, but I think it'll be a lower scoring and pretty tight games throughout.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta approach these series, this one, any other, without your homer glasses on, right? Like you got to take a look at both sides of the equation, and you got to be realistic about what this is. And Oilers fans should be realistic about the fact that the Flames can beat them. Like it's the fact that the Kings ran them to 7 games, and I'm not taking anything away from the Los Angeles Kings, but nobody figured that was going to happen. Like nobody going into that series said, oh yeah, the Kings are going to win this thing. A lot of people gave them credit and said this will be a lot longer series than people think it will be. But nobody picked the Kings to win, but yet they almost did. Like they had the chance a couple times to put the Oilers away, and it took the Oilers winning 2 games, 6 and 7, to stay alive in this series, right? So you have to be realistic and go. The Flames can absolutely beat the Oilers here. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we do, though, let's revisit the Kings series. I want to just kind of quickly run through what you thought of it, how that went compared to what your expectations were, what the results were kind of coming out of it. What's your biggest takeaway from the Kings and Oilers series?
I mean, I just think McDavid's performance in game 6 and 7 was just otherworldly. I think those were the 2 best games I've seen him play, which he didn't put up crazy amount of points in either, but he was just, it seemed like every shift he was on the ice, there was a scoring chance popping up. And it was crazy to watch. I think any questions of whether or not he could kind of elevate his team and lift them to a playoff series win or take them on a run, he pretty much answered because he was as good as he has been throughout his career.
Isn't it funny how we can say Connor McDavid didn't put up a lot of points, but he put up 14 points in 7 games?
Yeah,
No, I get what you're saying. I totally agree with you. But like the fact that he can put up 2 points per game in the playoffs, that they are targeting him and zeroing in on him, and it's physical, and he's got to hit, he's got to do all these other things. And there's really not much of there was one game where the Oilers really kind of creamed the Kings, but there wasn't a ton of high scoring, really offensive things that you expect from the Oilers, yet somehow he still got 14 points in 7 games. And to us, we look at that and go, well, he was good, but you're right. Like he was elevated in the 6th and 7th game where he just decided, you know what, I'm not letting us lose. Like that's what I saw of a player when he was playing in those final 2 games. He just was not going to let the Oilers lose. So I have to ask you this now, can he elevate another level? Because my expectation is he's probably going to have to. Like if you're playing the Calgary Flames, as good as McDavid was, and as all worldly as you said, he looked in those last 2 games, can he elevate it even more? Does he have another level? We always kind of say, what else can he do? But he always does more. Can he do more in this series?
I mean, I guess we'll find out. Like he's the best player in the world. I think anything's really possible with him. He's shown that. Like there's so many times where we think certain things he won't be able to hit, whether there was the 100 points last season, whether it was to come back in this series. Like he's just constantly proving to us that he's capable of things that no one expects. So do I think it's possible? Yeah. And I think, like you said, especially given what could be happening with Draisaitl here, they're going to need him to be at least as good as he was in game 6 and 7, if not better.
My big takeaway from the series with the Kings was that the Kings just outshot the Oilers almost every game in the first period. There were a couple at the end where the Oilers said, you know what, we can't let this happen anymore. We're screwed. And then there was one game, I think the 8-2 blowout or whatever it was, where they sort of had a really good first period and scored quite a bit and got that early lead. Outside of that, the Kings outshot them a lot. Now, the dangerous scoring chances might not have been there, but they shot a lot. And I am a little bit concerned that the Oilers have this tendency to kind of, I think we talked about it before, and I said this in the past. It's like, you don't know you're in a fight till you get punched in the face a couple of times. Well, the Oilers need to get punched a couple of times. I think that'll happen with Calgary. So I'm not necessarily worried that they aren't going to get into this game right away, but that is a bit concerning when you watch that series against the Kings. Is there anything that you took away from the games against LA that has you a little bit worried when it comes to playing Calgary?
I think for the most part, like, obviously there's some mistakes that can't happen, right? Like Duncan Keith, and I think it was game 5, really struggled. Like, you're not going to be able to have performances like that against this team. Mike Smith with that blunder in game 1 that we know about, and then maybe 1 or 2 other soft goals. I know he had a pretty good series overall, but you just can't really make mistakes against those teams. So any of those soft goals, those defensive lapses, they really can't happen, or the Flames will make them pay.
So one of the takeaways specifically about a certain player, Leon Draisaitl, here with the Kings series, is that he's hurt. We knew kind of he was maybe not feeling 100% coming into the series because he didn't play every single game kind of down the stretch there. They rested him a little bit and whatever. But then he got caught in a scrum, taken down. What was it? By Mikey Anderson is who took him down.
Yeah.
And so he's got a high ankle sprain that he's dealing with now. He battled through. He played well, even though he was seriously not himself. But he was really good. But he's not recuperated yet. He's playing. Ken Holland said coming out of the press conference, and even Jay Woodcroft said today that everybody who did not skate in practices, there's been a lot of guys missing, are all playing. So Draisaitl for sure is the one everybody's kind of watching here. How worried are you about Leon Draisaitl's health, his status, the injury, how much it might play a factor in a series against Calgary, who's probably going to go right at him?
Very worried, honestly. I think it sounds like it's a high ankle sprain. So you could see in game 6, like when he finished the rest of it, and then game 7, he was laboring. And I mean, considering all things considered, he played pretty well, but he was really gutting it out. And that's just in a game and a half. So in another potential 7-game series here, he could be feeling it a lot. And I think obviously he's kind of a guy that slows the game down already. So in that sense, I think it's better for a guy like him in a sense than someone like McDavid, who really relies on speed, but still him not being at 100% against a team that I think overall is deeper to begin with, puts the Oilers in a pretty tough spot.
Would you, if the Oilers go up, say 1-0 in this series, would you even consider resting Draisaitl? Because that was one of the questions Frank Saravalli of Daily Faceoff asked was, hey, if Draisaitl's as injured as it sounds like he's injured, do you rest him? Do you give him a couple games, 1 or 2, and then put him in the meat of the series, even though, I mean, shoot, you're playing Calgary and meat could be game 3, right? Like it could be over by game 3. So do you even chance risking what could happen in the series if Draisaitl's not playing, or do you go, well, maybe he needs more time?
The way I look at it is with an injury like that, assuming it is kind of what we've all heard, is I don't think giving him 1 game off is going to really do a whole lot. Like, I don't think having an extra 3 days rest, 2 days rest, whatever it be, and maybe you disagree, but I can't see him all of a sudden sitting out game 2 if they were to win game 1 and then come up flying in game 3. Like, I think it's still going to feel pretty much the same way either way.
Yeah, and not only that, but Draisaitl's not coming out. Like, if you ask him, he's like, what are you talking about? There's no way I'm not playing, right? Like, he will absolutely play. These guys play through everything. And I'm not advocating, shooting a guy up or anything like that to get him to the point where he doesn't feel it. But I mean, tape it up, right? Like, that's what these guys want you to do. Put whatever you got to put on it. Brace the snot out of this thing. Give him whatever he needs to sort of be able to operate at 75 to 80%, if that's even possible. And then play him as much as you can, or much as he's willing to play, without really aggravating a long-term serious injury. Like, the last thing you want to do is risk really hurting a guy and letting him hurt himself long-term. But he's never coming out if you give him the choice. So it doesn't matter if the Oilers are up 3-0 in the series. I don't think he's coming out. Like, I don't think he's going to sit out. I just don't see it happening. So the Oilers would have to decide to sit him. What do you think happens here then in terms of his minutes? Like, would you say, okay, let's just watch his minutes every game? Because there was quite a discrepancy. He still played a lot. He played over 20 minutes in that last game. But would you go, okay, well, there was like a 6 or 7 minute difference between McDavid and Draisaitl Now, they don't always play on the same line, but would you be doing that if you're Woodcroft? Would you be like, look, I know you want to play. I know we're going to let you play. We absolutely need you, but you're not playing as much as we probably would normally play you. What would you do there?
Yeah, I think specifically if they're or up in games, like especially late or just kind of whenever, if they have a lead, I think at 5v5 he could maybe get exposed a little bit just because he really is laboring when it comes to skating right now. Obviously on the power play, you keep giving him those minutes. He has that shot regardless. And like I said, I thought overall he actually did play pretty well last game, all things considered. But I do think certain times throughout the game he will need to rest just because he could get exposed 5-on-5 with his kind of lack of movement right now.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how they work around this. If they just say, you know what, let's not even talk about it. Let's not even we'll pretend like it's not a thing. We're not going to mention it in the locker room. We're not if I'm another Oiler player, I'm going, okay, let's get like you said, let's get an early elite as we can. Let's get up so we don't have to force him to play as much as he might normally need to. Just mentally, I would be like, okay, let's help our buddy out here, right? Because we don't need him having to play all these minutes and playing catch up in the second and third period, which is what the Oilers did a lot against LA, right? So I think that's the deal. What have you heard, if anything, about the other guys who didn't skate? Because there was quite a few people at practice who were missing, not just Draisaitl, but like Evander Kane didn't skate, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins didn't skate. There was a lot of guys missing, like Mike Smith, Duncan Keith, Connor McDavid from 2 days ago, I think it was. But even still, they addressed it today. Like all the guys who did not skate today, Woodcroft said would be available. I don't know if this is just what you expect this time of year when you're kind of beat up. They're long series. You don't need everybody to skate all the time. It's just practice, as Alan Iverson would say. But what do you make of this? Is this at all something that the Oilers and fans are like, we should be keeping an eye on?
When I first saw the tweet today saying that all three were expected to play, I was kind of nervous and looked into seeing like what was wrong with Nugent Hopkins and Kane because I hadn't heard anything prior, and it didn't seem like anything. Like, I don't think there's anything at all really other than maybe maintenance days, and in the playoffs, everyone's kind of banged up too. So when they have a few days off here, it doesn't hurt to just let them reset and try and get ready. But I don't think there's anything too concerning with those two. I think the big issue is Draisaitl.
Yeah, we're certainly in a situation where if it's more than just Draisaitl, like it's already bad if it's just Draisaitl, right? Like it's not good if he's hurt because he's a huge part of this team. If not the second most dangerous, sometimes on any given night, the most dangerous player they always have. But if Kane's not feeling it or Ryan Nugent-Hopkins isn't feeling it, we got a problem because that's going to be bad news for the Oilers if that happens at all. We'll switch gears just a little bit and let's talk about what might actually need or the Oilers might need to do to compete, to win, to take this series against the Flames. Because I think if we're admitting it, and you cover the Flames, so you're going to be able to know and can shed some insight on this. Physically, the Flames are probably better. On the blue line, the Flames are probably better. In goaltending, even though Mike Smith has played pretty well, the Flames are better. So what do the Oilers need to do to compete here and to steal this one, whether it's in 6 or 7? I guess steal is not the right word because they'd have McDavid and Draisaitl, so they can win against anybody and they know it. But what do they got to do to keep up in this series?
I think secondary scoring will be huge. Obviously, we know that McDavid's probably going to continue up just to play incredibly. So I think guys like Evander Kane, he was incredible in that first series. So if he's able to keep that going, I think Nugent Hopkins, if he can chip in a little bit more, Yamamoto, Puljujarvi, they were a bit quiet in the first round. So I think if they're able to get going, then that helps a ton. I know the Flames have some secondary scoring as well in their lineup, but they struggled in round 1 too. So I think if the Oilers guys are able to outperform like the Flames, say second and third lines, then they could be pretty good through at least the first few games here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if some of the guys that didn't really show up for the Oilers, like it's not like they were playing badly. Like Jesse Puljujarvi still played a decent game. He didn't play a ton of minutes, but he played an effective style of game when he played, but he didn't score much. He didn't really produce points. He didn't really offer a whole lot on the offensive side. If he can pot in a couple here, that would be very helpful. If Ryan McLeod can add a couple, that would be really good. If Josh Archibald can finally score on the multiple chances that he's getting in some of these games, that would be really good. So I think that depth is certainly key for it. Another factor for me, I think, is the Oilers and the Flames run and gun hockey will suit the Oilers as long as the Oilers stay within their own system. And we talked about this a little bit on our preview between the Oilers and Flames series. That'll be on the YouTube channel for Hockey Writers fans. But I had said at that point, I think if the Oilers get out of their head, because they did that against the game in Calgary at the regular season, where they just were like, okay, we're in the Battle of Alberta. Let's play the Calgary Flames and play our run and gun style of old. And Calgary beat them at that game. But the way that they played the Dallas Stars, Calgary didn't score much. Dallas didn't give them any reason to have to score much because they didn't score much either. I don't know that the Flames are going to be ready for a 5-4, 6-3, 7, whatever kind of game. So if the Oilers can figure out a way to get a lot of shots early, get some goals early in the first period, I don't know how Calgary's going to react to that. So that'll be very interesting to see if the Oilers can get some early goals on Markstrom, make them a little nervous, make that defense and the Flames, who didn't score early in the Star Series, have to pot some goals to catch up. So early leads, I think, will be a big part of this Oilers series against the Flames. You think I'm wrong there? Do you think Markstrom, the way that he played against Dallas, because he played really well, is shakeable? Can you get to him?
I think you can if you test him early, like you said. It's a completely different team. Like Dallas, he made some good saves, but he wasn't getting a ton of shots. Not a lot of high quality either. Obviously, he had the regular season he had, but coming off of 7 games with a team that doesn't score much, even in the regular season, the Stars didn't score much, and then switching over to the Oilers, like one of the league's most skilled teams. I think if they are able to get on him early, it could really kind of throw him off, at least to start the series, and then you already have the advantage early on.
Who's more likely to get out of their game? Because the Flames are a team that's very well structured. Their systems are really good. Daryl Sutter just makes them play that way, and it worked. Like this season, I don't know that anybody, you cover the Flames, did anybody expect them to be as good as they've been this year? Like they were really, really good. Like they have a decent team, but that system, that structure, it worked to a T. So that's what wins them hockey games. Meanwhile, Woodcroft has come in for the Oilers, and he's really harped on the details. He's gotten down to the nitty gritty of what works for them and what doesn't. And when they play their game, they're very difficult to beat. In fact, they've beaten Calgary a couple times. Who do you think gets out of their head first? Like there's a lot of guys in this series that can make you do that, from Matthew Tkachuk on Calgary to Zach Kassian, Josh Archibald in Edmonton. Like who shakes first, who cracks first, who bends and maybe breaks first?
So I will say, to your credit, like once they hired Woodcroft, they got a lot better with it, but I still think the Oilers are the more fragile of the two teams, just because the Flames, they can run up the score or they can play very low scoring, tight checking. Like you said, Sutter this season has just made a world of difference. And coming into the season, I had the Flames as a borderline playoff team, and I thought the Oilers were going to win the Pacific. So I think just the system Sutter's brought and like the calm approach they take to games has really benefited them. And I do think if one team is to get a little bit rattled and kind of get away from their game plan, it would be the Oilers.
So having said that, if this doesn't go, whether it's Calgary or Edmonton or somebody who sort of gets out of their own element of what works for them, what do you expect to see here? Like, is this going to be a series that is really, really close and guys scramble and they keep it together and everybody's kind of in it and it's always competitive? Or does this have the ability to be a blowout for one side?
I think for the most part, it'll stay pretty tight. You might get one game in there that's a bit lopsided, but I think both teams know what's at stake here, and they've played each other a few times this year too, so they kind of know what to expect from one another. So I'm hoping, and I think at the same time, that it will be a pretty tight series.
I think it's going to hinge on power plays. I think if the Oilers can get the calls they were getting in against the Kings, because man, if you watch those series in the past against Montreal, against Winnipeg, Chicago, they did not get calls. They weren't getting any. But in Los Angeles, they were getting a lot of calls. In fact, they were getting some calls that didn't exist. They were getting some power plays that they maybe didn't deserve, and they were taking advantage of them. So I think if that can happen and the Oilers are getting some power plays and they can put some early goals on the board, especially since they don't have home ice advantage. And I don't know actually how much that's a factor. Like the Oilers fans have been awesome, but the Oilers made comments twice. McDavid, that they got it wrapped up in the emotion of playing at home. So I wonder if starting on the road will help them. But I think those power plays will be key. Do you think it helps the Oilers or hurts you? Obviously in a 7-game series, it doesn't help them that they don't get that extra game at home. But do you think starting on the road is the worst thing in the world for Edmonton?
I don't think it's the worst, but I think obviously we'll kind of have to wait to see tomorrow's game to judge on that, because that building, especially with just how big of a rivalry it is, it's going to be just rocking tomorrow. So we'll see if some of the guys on the Oilers, how they handle that. But I do think for the most part, like your important positions, you have like a veteran goalie in Mike Smith. So he knows what to expect. And on the blue line, you got guys like Duncan Keith that they brought in kind of for this very reason. Up front, like McDavid's been through this before. So I don't think it's the worst. I think that I think they'll be able to handle it. But again, we'll kind of have to wait and see what it's like tomorrow.
Did you see that interview with Colby Armstrong and Mike Smith?
No, I didn't.
Oh yeah, he did like a sit down one-on-one, and he was talking about how it was difficult to transfer from Calgary to Edmonton, and he said he was kind of pissed that Calgary didn't want him anymore, and that he moved over, and he's got this, he's got this whatever in his crawl to really prove it. So Mike Smith's been pretty good, and I think that if he doesn't make those big glaring mistakes like he made in Game 1. He really up his game here, and he's been good. So another up level for Mike Smith could be something fun to watch. If he's in Calgary, I think he's going to relish the idea that the Flame fans are probably going to boo him every time he touches the puck because he's a former Flame, right? So I think that should be very interesting. And I just hope the Oilers don't get carried away. Like Zach Kassian doesn't get in there and try to run over everything and take a bunch of penalties, or whatever happens there, because the Oilers can capitalize on their power plays. I don't know. You tell me, how good has Calgary's power play been?
Not as good as Edmonton's. I struggled in the first round. Just Jake Ottinger was basically unbeatable in that series. But in the regular season, I think they finished 6th in league standing. So it's pretty solid too. Yeah.
So there you go. So if the Oilers get caught in the emotion of it all and get some penalties called because the referees seem to be calling them, it could go the other way, right? Like they could give Calgary early advantages and reasons to score for no good reason at all. So it'll be really fun to watch. Let's take a prediction of Game 1. It's in Calgary. Right now, the Flames are probably the favorites for most people. What do you expect to see happen in Game 1? What's your prediction and maybe a score?
I think the Flames are going to come out flying in this, just with all the momentum they have right now, especially after that overtime series clinching win. So I say they come out fast right off the bat, and I'll say they win 4-2 tomorrow.
Okay, I'm thinking it might be Calgary, but I'm also going to say that I really like the way the Oilers have played the last 2 games. If they can figure out how to repeat this system and the process they played in Game 6 against the Kings and Game 7 against the Kings, that might be some of the best all-around hockey the Oilers have played. Like, they just were really solid defensively. They got a shutout in Game 7. They just rocked it. Like, they absolutely did what they needed to do to win that game and make sure they moved on. And if they can do that against Calgary to open the series, I wouldn't be surprised if they take it. So I'm going to say it's really, really close. I'm going to go Calgary 3-2 in overtime, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's the other way around. It wouldn't surprise me if the Oilers take that first win in overtime and get a 1-0 series lead, but I guess we'll see. If you had to make a not so or a bold prediction for this series, if you have to go, okay, here's one thing nobody's probably expecting. I'm putting you on the spot, by the way. What would you say we should watch for? Something that's just going to be like, really?
Yeah, really put me on the spot. Jeez. I don't know if it's a crazy, shocking one, but for some reason, I thought he would in the first round and he didn't. So I think Kyler Yamamoto is really going to come up big with some clutch goals for this team. Like I said, I still do think the Flames find a way to squeeze this one out, but I think he's going to have a really big series and kind of surprise some people.
I'm not far off from you in respect of like Kyler Yamamoto or a player like him, but for a different reason. I don't think it's going to be scoring. I think everybody's expecting like Kachuk and Kassian to have a moment or 2 or 3. But I actually think that somebody else, not Kassian, like a Yamamoto, is going to drive somebody on the Calgary Flames crazy because he loves to play inside your jersey. He loves to get up in there, whether it's Archibald or Yamamoto. I don't think Puljujärvi is going to fight, but even he could drive somebody crazy. Like, I just have a feeling that there's going to be some, like, if you remember in the first round of a lot of the games, I think the first 2 games of the first was Boston and somebody, there was like line brawls. You know what I mean? Like, there were some serious like fisticuffs going on that you wouldn't normally expect, but the element of whatever is ratcheted up for the playoffs. And this is going to happen in this Calgary Edmonton series for sure. So I think somebody's going to drive, whether it's a Kachuk or somebody, over the edge here. And we're going to see a good old fight, a good old fashioned whatever in Game 1. It would not shock me at all if that series kicks off with an element of physicality and really everybody's like, okay, now it's on, right? Because we already know it's going to be good, but that would really set the tone. And I think somebody wants to. Somebody on Calgary, somebody in Edmonton really wants to set that tone and say, okay, yeah, you're not as big and tough as you think you are, so let's go, right? I don't know if the Oilers are going to win that battle, but I think it's going to happen. It'll be very, very interesting. But it'll be a fun series. We'll have hopefully a chance to talk about it again. And one of these teams is up 3-0 or almost putting it the other at the elimination, so we can do this a couple times. But I appreciate it. This was fun. I'm very curious to see where we'll be at when we do this show next week. See where the series is locked at, or if it's close, if it's a blowout by one side or the other. Kind of be fun to watch. Thanks everybody who joined us for this. As you're watching this, the game is tonight, so get yourself ready. We're doing chicken wings and stuff like that because we're ready to go. My house is ready to go. So enjoy the game. Watch the other videos on the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. Check it out. Check all the articles out. Colton's doing some stuff for Calgary and for Edmonton. I'm doing a bunch of stuff for Edmonton. Keep it up with the rumors of everybody who's doing things in the off season, because there's all sorts of talk about that. Enjoy the series, guys, because it's going to be a hoot. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, guys. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and go Oilers, go. Take care, everybody.